It's Wednesday, April 14th, 2021, and we've got some more details about Africa. Get ready. Let's go. We've got a few different things here today. I think today we got an IOHK blog post that taught us a little bit more about Plutus and EUTXO. We're going to get into those details. And Charles also did a really great interview yesterday. When you're listening to this, it'll be yesterday. And in that interview, he gave us a bunch of details about Africa that we really didn't know before. So we've got some good stuff today. Hope you enjoy it. Item number one. Okay, we have discussed how the EUTXO architecture in Cardano produces some benefits over the account balance system and Ethereum, and obviously over the UTXO system in Bitcoin. But we haven't really gotten into the nitty-gritty details of how exactly it's different. We've talked about the ramifications, but we haven't really talked in detail about why. Now there is this great new blog post from IOHK written by Lars Brunius, who is the head of education, the guy running the Plutus Pioneers program. And he's explained to us exactly what the E in EUTXO means. I've read through it. I'm going to give you my kind of beginner level comprehension of what exactly this all means. We know we've got UTXO in Bitcoin. The way that works, the way Lars explains it here, he says, hey, it's like a lock and key system. You've got addresses and you've got, which are a public key or a hash of a public key, and you've got private keys, and signing a transaction with that private key is what allows you to send those unspent transaction outputs, the UTXO, the unspent transaction output from a certain address to another address, right? That's the Bitcoin system. In EUTXO, instead of the public key or the hash of a public key being the address or the lock in Lars's analogy here, and the signature using the private key being the key that unlocks a lock, addresses in the EUTXO model can contain scripts, right? What are scripts? Scripts are just a set of instructions that can be run by other software, right? So if a program is a set of instructions that can be run by a computer's processor, a script is a set of instructions that's run by other software, right? So we can just think of it as a program that's going to be run by another program. So the actual addresses in EUTXO can contain scripts, right? So when a node, here Lars says, when a node validates a transaction, the node determines whether or not the transaction is allowed to use a certain output as an input. The transaction will look up the script provided by the output's address and will execute the script if the transaction can use the output as an input. Right? We already know in Bitcoin that's not the case. We don't have like smart contracts that reside at an address on the Bitcoin network, right? So difference number one, we've got little programs that can live at addresses. The second difference is that outputs can carry data in addition to the address they're being sent to and the value. So we've got little programs that can reside at addresses, and unspent transaction outputs can carry data. When validating an address, the script will access the data. I'm reading right here. The script will access the data being carried by the output, the transaction being validated, and some additional pieces of data called redeemers, which the transaction provides for every input. So given all this, the script has enough context to give a yes or no answer, and these situations can become highly complex, right? What we've got going on here is we know that this is like smart contracts will be written in Plutus, right? What is Plutus? Plutus is just basically a subset of Haskell. It's a subset of Haskell, and Haskell is just a bunch of functions, right? What are functions? Functions, you can think of functions as just lookup tables, right? So given this input, a function will always produce this output. Given this other input, it will always produce this output. And then because Haskell is just lambda calculus, we can also nest functions. So we take a function and we put it inside of another function, right? So that first function will give it an input and it'll produce an output. And then that output becomes the input for the outer function. And a Plutus smart contract is just a bunch of these functions together, often nested, like I just described. One function's inside of another one. So you give an input to the first function, produces an output, and then that output becomes the input for the larger function. That's the way you can handle multiple variables in lambda calculus, which Haskell is basically just a variant of. So smart contracts are just that. They're just a bunch of logic that says, given these bunch of inputs, what is the output, right? That's all a smart contract in Plutus is. And now we know those smart contracts live in this system. Why does this make it so that Cardano is safer and more predictable than the system we have in Ethereum, which is an account balance system? The cool thing about this is that the validity of a transaction can be checked off-chain before the transaction is sent to the blockchain, right? So how can that be? You're thinking to yourself, so the transaction can still fail even after it's been validated off-chain if the person with the right to spend that unspent transaction output has already spent it, right? If they're trying to do a double spend transaction, it'll still fail. But barring that circumstance, you can validate the transaction off-chain because the success or failure of the transaction depends only on the transaction itself and its inputs and nothing else in the blockchain. So you remember from our first discussion of UTXO versus EUTXO versus account balance, that's Bitcoin versus ADA versus Ethereum, we talked about the fact that in Ethereum, scripts can access the whole blockchain. So right here is the mechanism by which scripts in Cardano don't have to access the whole blockchain. Right here, we see Lars is writing, the success or failure of transaction validation depends only on the transaction itself and its inputs and not on anything else on the blockchain. That's the different part from the account balance system in Ethereum. In Ethereum, the script can look at everything in the blockchain. It has access to everything, right? And obviously, like giving a script access to everything in a blockchain can involve, you can think logically, you can come to the conclusion that that's going to involve a lot more attack surface for exploiters of any kind of smart contract on Ethereum. In Cardano, we don't have that. Your machine can just look at the transaction, its inputs, and nothing else on the blockchain to validate the transaction. So not only do we have like less of an attack surface, right? It's like you don't have these super powerful scripts that can look at anything on the blockchain. They can look at anything on the blockchain. These scripts in Cardano are just going to look at the transaction and its inputs and nothing else, right? That also makes it more predictable. So because of that, because the script only has to look at those things are all sort of ascertainable and they're not going to be like changing, right? Versus the Ethereum situation where the script is looking at everything on the blockchain and the whole blockchain is going to be changing a lot, even in a split second on a busy blockchain. So your computer off-chain can determine, because it already knows the inputs and the transaction, it can determine exactly how much that transaction is going to cost, determine the fee, you know that going in, And then the transaction only fails if you are attempting to do a double spend, which is the outcome we want. So Lars writes right here, this contrasts with an account-based model where a transaction can fail in mid-script execution. This can never happen in EUTXO. He says also transaction execution costs can be determined off-chain before transmission. And I hope we keep seeing these. I hope we just get more and more Plutus information as we get closer and closer to Alonzo. Because I think there's a lot of people out there wanting to write stuff, write code, write smart contracts in Plutus. And there hasn't been a whole lot to go on up to this point. But we're starting to see stuff, man, every couple of days. So IOHK, keep up this pace. It's working great so far. Item number 2, it looks like Occam.Fi, who we've covered previously, has partnered with Bitcoin.com to be their custodian for their ADA to ETH bridge. Any native token released on Cardano that is launched through the Occam Razor platform can be switched to ERC20 and vice versa using the intuitive and easy to use interfaces of the Bitcoin.com exchange. Then they compare that to functionality on Binance Smart Chain. So this sounds great, right? The one thing I wonder though is, doesn't the Cardano ERC20 converter already do this for us? Item number 3. So LunarCrush just interviewed Charles Hoskinson, and he gave us a few bits of additional information about Ethiopia and Africa. Number 1, the IOHK office in Ethiopia is merging with the Singularity Net office. It'll be 30 to 50 people, so a pretty large presence in Addis Ababa. Number 2, the Africa special will be announced very soon. In Africa, they're going to be doing both fintech and govtech. That's number 3. Number 4, everything on the governance side is going to be upgraded across a wide swath of African nation states in the next 10 years. Number 5, lots of possible use cases, including supply chains in agritech, putting land on a ledger, voting, identity, reputation, as in credit, and payment systems. Number 6, Africa is like investing in China in the 1980s. We've heard this a lot. Number 7, the demographics of Africa make it a really easy call to direct investment there. Number 8, Charles says Ethiopia in particular is very special to us, and we have actually closed some deals. So he said, in the context of Ethiopia, we have actually closed some deals. This is the first time we got the White Cheek Tarako and John Hancock tweet. This is the first time we're hearing Charles, I believe, this is the first time we're hearing Charles actually say, we have actually closed some deals in the context of Ethiopia. He said, we'll talk about those at the Africa special, which is going to be announced soon. Number 9, Charles says there will be security token plays in Africa in the mid-2020s since there are no stock exchanges there. And number 10, there's a big unannounced partnership called the DCF with a brand name consultancy we will recognize. That's the LunarCrush interview. All right, that is it. I hope you're having a great Wednesday. I knew this week we'd get some good news. I have a feeling the Africa special date is probably coming up. We are on the path to Alonzo and the rollout of all this Africa stuff. I will talk to you tomorrow.